Welcome, welcome. My name is Lloyd Borrell. I'm your host. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my guest Bill Cadwallader. Bill Cadwallader is an author, an accomplished speaker, and certified electromagnetic radiation specialist. He was formerly in the US Marine Corps until he retired as a lieutenant colonel and previously worked in the Information Technology Department for Clark County, Nevada. Bill has presented at the annual Cancer Convention in Los Angeles and has taught at the International Institute for Building Biology and Ecology. Bill Cadwallader, welcome to the EMF Health Summit.
Thank you, Lloyd, for giving me the opportunity to participate. And I really want to thank you to bring all these experts together in talking about this most important subject on EMFs, and even more important, the solution. So thanks again, Lloyd, for having me here.
Well, thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I really do. And thank you for accepting my invitation too. So, I was looking through your bio before I came on, and you've had like this whole rather impressive career, might I say, before you got into this EMF thing. So that's my question. What got you into EMFs?
Thanks, Lloyd, and thank you for the kind words. I've been working in IT all of my life, and in IT, information technology, I had a person who was working with me, a coworker, and when I saw him, every time I saw him, he held his cell phone to his head, before meetings, after meetings, walking to the vehicle. And what happened was he developed a huge tumor right where he held the cell phone. Now, this cell phone is off, and it wasn't on the back of his head. It wasn't on this side. It wasn't on the top. It was right where he held the cell phone. And he had surgery and then massive chemo. And we had a sigh of relief, but it grew back. Surgery again, massive chemo, and then he died.
Oh, dear.
He left a wife who was a widow. He left 7 children who are now fatherless. And at that moment in time, I knew, Lloyd, that industry was never going to tell us how to use cell phones and all this electronic devices safely. And that's when I started my journey. And the most important thing, I think, is what all the issues are, but even more importantly, we have solutions. And that's what I want to.
Of course, super important. We talk about.
You do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And and that's obviously that's when it really hits home, isn't it? Is when it's somebody and there's no proof. We can't prove. You can't prove that it was a cell phone. But when you see this over and over again, as you talk about in your book, which is here, just to give you a little plug.
Oh, thank you.
I've heard this also talking to many people, and I know people too, and so it becomes very clear that EMFs are contributing, stroke causing these health issues, does it not?
Yes, and again, you get emails, you get texts, you get, just like I do, on a weekly basis about these heartfelt stories. And again, as you said, we can't prove anything, but what does it cost to take a precautionary approach? And that's what I tell people. And normally when I'm in someone's home or I'm talking to them over the phone, I say, I have good, better, and best solutions. So depending upon what someone would do, I want them to take some solution.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think so many people like me, perhaps like you at one time, because I'm a rather law-abiding person, just because, I guess that's the way I am. And, I like people to be respectful and, do to others as they do to you. And therefore government and, officials, then I have always had a certain respect for them. But this is like when you begin to look at the science And when you look at the safety guidelines that the governments around the world are putting in place, not just the US government, but pretty much everywhere, with a few exceptions where they are more rigorous, places like China, places like Russia, then it's like there's something that doesn't quite add up here. And so, yeah, if you could just perhaps talk to that,
Sure. Good question. What happens is that there's a lot of things at stake here. And in the book, we talk about timelines on safe things that we thought at one time were safe, but actually turned out to be dangerous. So we have the timeline for asbestos. So everyone knows now asbestos is bad for you, but in 1918 was the first paper that said asbestos had health concerns. But it was decades after that they actually did anything. And most people don't know, in the tobacco area in the 50s, when they started to say, hey, we better get some filters, this isn't too healthy, the tobacco industry, they themselves, the actual one of the first filters was an asbestos filter. So talking about tobacco and asbestos, not very good. BPAs came up recently, maybe 10, 15 years ago, remember baby bottles and things like that. But in the 1930s was the first report, the research paper that said BPAs have huge health concerns. Also lead in paint. 1950s was the first report that talked about that, and that's gone now. And again, even lead in gasoline, 1922 is when they knew there was a problem with that. But again, it took years and decades after that. Even the most famous pesticide, DDT, everyone knows about DDT. And invented in the late 30s, by the 1950s, what had happened was they determined there were issues, and we're still living with those issues now. In the soil, there's still breakdown, there's still remnants of DDT rather. And then we come to the biggest one of all, tobacco. And everyone says, well, we know there's problems. But the first research paper was actually in 1929, where they associated lung cancer with tobacco. But in the US, it took to the early 2000s when they finally did the big settlement of the lawsuit. So again, there's a track record of all these safe things that were really dangerous, industry saying they were safe, but there's a collusion with government.
Yes.
And part of the collusion is that things like the FCC, let's take that, is the Federal Communications Commission actually makes money by selling bandwidth. And so they're basically linked up with all the telecommunications companies. And then also in the US, we have what's called a revolving door, where a lot of times people in the industry will then work for the FCC, for an example, for a while, and then they'll go back to industry. So again, what point are they supporting? And the final thing is the lobbying dollars. So the lobbying dollars that industry uses to convince legislatures at the federal, state, and local level, those are huge. So most people in the US say, hey, pharmaceuticals are the largest. And yes, they were about $277 million that they spent in as of January 2018. But if you take all the telecommunications, you take the Wi-Fi, you take the internet guys, in the US, it comes up to $410 million that are there to influence legislatures so they don't pass laws to restrict or, make the standards stricter. And it's really sad.
Yeah, it is. And so we've got this situation, as you say, where the FCC making money by selling the bandwidth. The FCC at the same time setting the guidelines for cell phones, but they're not responsible for the safety of these devices. How weird is that?
Yeah, it's one of the weirdest things, and we're still living with the 1996-1997 Telecommunications Act in the U.S., and literally it was said that here are the standards, and they've never changed that. And before the first cell phone was released in the U.S., there was no biological study that was ever produced to prove cell phones are hazardous. And the Bioinitiative report, which you're very familiar with, they have, as of 2012, over 3,800 studies that showed all the health concerns with all the telecommunications. And one thing in our Telecommunications Act, in that act of 1996, 1997, it says literally you can never deny a cell tower based on health or environmental concerns.
Yes.
Crazy, isn't it?
Yes. And so we've got this wireless world gone wild, have we not? They've coined this rather cleverly, coined this phrase "smart." Instead of wireless, they've chosen this word "smart," which is very smart. But anything smart is not smart because it's wireless. So it's just another word for wireless.
Yes.
I mean, so the world's been taken over. Because everybody wants this, don't they? And this is where we're going with the Internet of Things. That all these devices, everything you can imagine. We've had other guests talking about this. Even ties that are going to be smart for I don't know what reason. Which is rife with dangers, is it not? All this smart technology is rife with dangers.
You're 100% right. So when we had tobacco and they were proving that it was really dangerous, everyone knew tobacco smoking wasn't a good habit and everything else. It's the exact opposite with all these smart devices and cell phones. Everyone runs their entire life on it now. And it's helpful, makes them more productive and everything else, unknowing that there's electromagnetic radiation constantly being spewing from these devices that people are not even aware of. And I live in Las Vegas. Hopefully the sign in the back behind me says Las Vegas, and there's the Strip and the Eiffel Tower there.
I guess you were, living around there. Don't know why.
Yeah, I'm based in Las Vegas. I even put up our Eiffel Tower in the back. So it's half the size of Paris, but at least it's so I get to go to the CES show, the Consumer Electronics Show, every year in January in Las Vegas, and it's one of the biggest shows. And as you said, the new coin is be smart, be connected. So about 5 years ago, I started to see making everyday device being smart, like a coffee maker, you name it, and they're starting to put that in. But unknowns to most people is, like your cell phone, even if you're not making a call, with my measurements, I find every 6 to 30 seconds, it sends out pulses of radiation trying to find the nearest cell tower, Wi-Fi, or Bluetooth, even if you're not actively doing things. And it's hundreds of times the safe level. Same thing with these smart devices. They're constantly communicating. And they did a study in the Stockholm train station where they found out that there were over 20 different frequencies people were being bombarded with on a regular basis. Now, if you have one little Bluetooth device in the garage, tucked away somewhere, that's probably not going to affect you too much. But when you're starting to put them in every single device in homes, appliances, and everything, then you have this piling up of all these frequencies increasing the radiation. And some of the craziest things I saw just last year was they have Wi-Fi diapers. Why do you need Wi-Fi diapers? Because it tells the parent on their cell phone when the diaper is wet. But think about the child, constant radiation 24/7. I mean, talking about bad. And then they even had smart baby bottles. Smart baby bottles, can a parent sort of just look over and say, hey, the milk's sort of almost gone? No, it tells the temperature and how much is left. And it's constantly radiating. And one of the worst things that they had was a smart pacifier this year. So childs are sucking on a pacifier. It's telling the parent on their smartphone what the temperature is, and it's like sucking on a mini cell tower. I mean, it's just, and all the wearables that they're having now that people are putting on, and even smartphones. I was at a yoga conference recently, and a guy comes up, he was very proud of his smartwatch and his smartphone. And normally I'll measure, and there every 6 to 30 seconds you'll have a pulse of radiation. He carried his smartphone right in his breast pocket. He had his watch right there, and they were continually communicating. They never broke. It wasn't every 6 to 30 seconds, and it was hundreds of times the safe level. And I asked him, I said, this is pretty dangerous. And he said, if I doing this study, then every 3 months when I go in, I don't have to take a treadmill test.
Yeah.
And he was getting zapped continually. I mean, it's just sad.
And yeah, and as you say, it's people are so proud, aren't they, of these devices because they've got the latest gadget and they want to show their friends, and it does this and it does that. And we've been in this world for a long time, you know, of these, you know, proud of our consumer objects. And but now it's just seems to be all going that way. But it's not just smart even. Another big problem is light, and we've talked about light with a few other guests, but particularly I want to talk about, you know, lighting as in the dangers, because, you know, light has just such a we talked about this with Dr. Jack Cruz. It is just so fundamental to our health, the quality of light which we're exposed to. So, and then there's some real issues, isn't there, with these different forms of lighting, which are really taking over the market now. So perhaps you could just talk to that also before, and then we'll get into some solutions.
Sure. There, in the U.S., we have 4 different types of lighting. So the first one was the CFL lights, the compact fluorescent lights, or little curly Q lights in fluorescent tubes. So they passed some laws in the U.S. in the late 2000s where they said you have to make the lighting more efficient. So they came out with this, but there's 3 major problems with that. One is these lights, CFLs, they're electronic. So they produce dirty electricity, which is a type of radiation on the wire. Technically, it's called high-frequency voltage transients and harmonics, but it's constantly doing it thousands of times a second, and it piggybacks along the electrical wires. It also turns on and off anywhere from 5 to 10,000 or even 20,000 times a second. So it's constantly flickering, which is hard on your eyes and your brain. And then also in the CFLs, they actually have mercury. And Dr. Magda Havas up in Canada estimates the amount of mercury in one single bulb can contaminate up to 10,000 gallons of water. I mean, it's just crazy. So that's not a very good solution. Then they came out with LEDs. LEDs are electronics as well. So a lot of the LEDs produce the dirty electricity right there that increases the radiation. And they also have a flicker. So they're flickering as well. Your eyes can't pick it up, but your brain is slowly picking that up. And as you know, the blue light is the third problem with the LEDs. It's producing blue light, where in the Tour de France, when they're looking at their screen, LED screens, they actually wear glasses to cut that out, the blue light. But a couple of things that it reduces the melatonin production, and a couple of things melatonin does is it allows you to get into deeper sleep. So if you don't have that, you're not going to get sleep as well. And then also melatonin, another thing it does, it suppresses cancer. So again, that's another problem with the LED light. You want the maximum melatonin. Now we get down to now the incandescent lights that we had for over 100 years. Those are still good. We still recommend them. And if you look at a budget in a house for electricity, less than 10% of the budget, electrical budget, is in lighting. So again, if you save 10% of your electrical, you're basically only saving 1% of your total electrical bill if you save 10% in lighting. So again, I like incandescents. They've been around. The light that they put off is very close. And then also they have a new halogen. So we're talking the halogen with the big base, screw in, not the small one. But again, they're incandescent, and they also have an energy saving device where they'll save anywhere from 10 to 20% on your night lighting. But make sure if someone gets the halogen, it's called halogen incandescent, and it has the wide base like the normal incandescent. So those are my 2 top choices for lighting.
Right. So the halogen, that would be a halogen without a transformer unit. Is that what you're saying? Because a lot of these devices have this switch mode power supply, don't they? Which is causing this flicker, these harmonics and transients, as you say, this dirty electricity again. So we don't want that, do we?
No, not at all. And the original halogens that came out all had a transformer in them. But now they have halogen light bulbs. Looks just like a regular incandescent light bulb. And again, make sure you get the wide screw-in base. Those are the ones that are okay. Anything that's push pin or things like that, those all have a little transformer in them. And switch mode power supplies.
So Yeah, so incandescent. So when you say incandescent, so just so folks at home understand, we're talking about the traditional, like we've always had, like I had, well, we all had, like, it's not even when I was a kid, it's like up to like 10 years ago, wasn't it? Or 15 years ago.
Right.
That's all there was. So that is, as I understand it, your number one recommendation. And then the number two is the halogen here without the transformer, with the screw in, as you say. And then possibly number three is the LED, because we don't get the mercury, but way down at the bottom to be avoided is those CFL things.
Yeah, but I would really concentrate on the first two, just because of the dirty electricity, the blue light, and the flickering that LEDs do. So I would really, and I was in a big box hardware store here in the U.S., and they now have literally any type of light you want in the halogen or traditional light bulb. Mm-hmm. So again, in the past you couldn't get it, but now they all have it.
Yeah. So, and then we've got electromagnetic, so we're skirting around a little bit, but electromagnetic fields come in many shapes and forms, and so there is a growing awareness for this wireless form of, radiation, that it is some kind of pollution. There is some kind of vague growing awareness of that, I feel, but where we're really not, people just don't know about the dangers is in terms of the wiring, that just your electrical wiring in your home, that emits, even in the, in the best of worlds, it emits electromagnetic fields, and there can be all kinds of pollution, notably with what you were saying before, with this dirty electricity, that's to say these additional frequencies. So perhaps you could speak to that, and more in terms of solutions, because I think you've got a few things perhaps you can offer on that.
Oh, sure. What happens is as you said, we have four major types of radiation. We have through the air, wireless, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth, but then most people aren't aware of the radiation on the wires. So in your walls, you have electric radiation from those wires, you have magnetic radiation, as well as you have dirty electricity. And most people don't understand there's no shielding. So it comes out, the electric radiation is the first one, and it's like water in a hose. So if you have a nozzle on the end, but you haven't opened up the nozzle, there's still water in that hose. Similarly, in the electricity in the wall, if it's live, you have electric radiation or electricity in those wires, and that can come out 6 to 8 feet. So think about where you sleep, coming out 6 to 8 feet. That would cover most people when they're sleeping. And then if you have a lamp, let's say you have it plugged in but not on, you have electric radiation because that cord has live electricity in it. Once you turn on the lamp, then you actually have generated magnetic radiation as well. And so you have both electric and magnetic radiation. And then the third type is, as you said, dirty electricity, and that's caused by energy efficient devices as well as any type of electronics, because electronics can't run on 120 volts in the US and 240 in Europe. And what happens is they have to reduce it to 19 volts or less. As they reduce it, it literally causes spikes of radiation that now piggyback along the line. So the more electronics you have, the more energy efficient devices like light bulbs and other things, it creates a lot of dirty electricity. And so those are the three major parts that are the problem. And so we do have some solutions on that. Yes. One of the first things we want to do, and I'll just cover a couple, is the nightstand. So what do most people have on their nightstand? They have lamps and they're charging their cell phone. So all night long, they're literally getting zapped by their cell phone because it's trying to find the nearest wireless, Wi-Fi, and cell phone device. And then also when you have it plugged in, because you have a charger and it's not using 120 volts when it's actually charging at the end, then you're creating electric radiation, magnetic radiation, and dirty electricity. So one of the worst things you can do is have your cell phone charged on your nightstand. You want to move that as far away as possible. I had a story. I was doing an inspection here in Las Vegas, and as I walked out, the lady of the couple said, the girl across the street just had surgery. I said, surgery? What for? They had to remove a tumor from the side of her face. And I said, how long did it take? It took 9 hours. And she said she sleeps with her cell phone right next to her pillow.
Oh
And
boy.
again, what most people don't know is every 6 to 30 seconds, in my measurements, it's sending out pulses of radiation trying to find the nearest cell tower, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth. So again, if she would have just taken that phone, put it on the other side, and if she wanted to use it as a timer, then turn the airplane mode off, like an alarm clock, airplane mode off, and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi on. Off. Airplane mode on, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi off. That's the safe way where you knock off all the radiation. But now the manufacturers are getting smart to that. So I just had an electrician I was working with, and he says he's turning his Bluetooth off on his kid's tablet, but it says we will turn this on in 24 hours. It only turns it off for 24 hours. So again, if she would have done that. I saw the lady recently, and she said, there's another sad story, another sad part to the story. I said, what was that? She didn't believe it was her phone. It grew back in a year, and this time it was another 9 hours of surgery. This time it was cancerous, and she had plastic surgery. And Lloyd, I can't say that the cell phone caused anything or anything like that, but what does it take just to be precautionary, just to take the cell phone and move it as far away?
Yes.
It doesn't take
It doesn't. No, and we're not really going into the science today of which there is so much of, because we've talked about it with other guests, so we don't really have time for that. We want to focus more on the solutions, but there is so much science. So if this is the only interview you've listened to or you've watched so far, please look at the science, notably with Dr. McCullough, Dr. Klinghardt, Dr. Daniel Pomper, Dr. Zach Bush. There's just so much science. Professor Ole Johansson, also Dr. David Carpenter, Harvard medical trained doctor. There's so much science on this that the dangers are very, very clear. And one of the things you mentioned in your book was this toggle switch.
Sure.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. I'd be happy to. So what happens is, as you look around your room, you have lamps plugged in and you have all these extension cords. Remember, they're all live electrical wires, so the electric radiation is coming 6 to 8 feet out. So we have people who say, I can't unplug these at night. It's too much trouble. So we have 3 solutions. One is the toggle switch. It's a great little switch. You just plug your lamp in here, and then it has an on and off switch.
If you could just perhaps lift it to the other side of you. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, again, you just plug in your lamp here, and there's a little on and off switch here. And I like this one because it's lit up, and it's under $4. So if someone says, hey, just before I go to bed, I'll turn that off. Now, they come out with another thing that I really like as well. This is a remote control cutoff switch. So what happens is you would plug your lamp into here on this side, but also if you need some more outlets, you'd plug in a power strip. And the nice thing about this plugs into the wall, but it has a remote control shutoff. Yes. So at night, I'm going to bed, I just hit the off button, and it turns off all the electric wires that are coming out from the plug. So again, these are 2 great little devices.
And people are probably thinking, well, yeah, hang on a minute, Bill, but that's wireless, that thing you're showing us. But it's only for a fraction of a second, is it not? Yes.
And again, if someone can use a TV remote, they can use this. And you're using this once a night, and a TV remote you're using 500 times a day or 100 times a day. So again, you're right, exactly. It's just, if you can use a TV remote, you can use this. And it's just a microsecond. But that's a great question.
Yeah. So
we also had one other thing. If someone wanted to shield the wires in the wall, so what they can do is 2 solutions is put up some shielding behind that, which I often do. But again, if you're going to do shielding like that, you always have to have an expert measure it with a meter, or yourself with a meter, because most shielding is reflective, so you don't want to make the case wrong. And for the people who are extremely electrically sensitive, we recommend that they turn off the breakers to that room or any room that would affect it. And again, make sure your smoke detector, your security, your safety systems, your landline aren't on those breakers, and see how you sleep for a week or 2. And if you sleep a lot better, then they actually make a remote control to turn the breakers off from your bedroom as well. But that does have to be installed by an electrician. So.
Yes, excellent. So how to take control, and that's really what we're talking, that's what these solutions are. But you have laid out, you've got a 7-step process for taking control, which I think is rather good. So perhaps you could talk us through that, please.
I'd be happy to. And so a lot of times we recommend that you get an expert to your house if there's someone locally. But if there's not someone locally, then what we have a solution where you can literally buy meters. So the first thing is, if you want to do that, and again, there is phone consulting from you and me and other people that can help them with the meters, which works out well as also. But the first question is what meter to use. So one meter will not measure all 4 types of radiation. So again, you want to make sure you get 2 or 3, actually 3 meters that will measure all 4 types of radiation: Wi-Fi and wireless and Bluetooth through the air, and then electric, magnetic radiation, and then as well as dirty electricity. So once you've done that, the question is, how do you measure? So it has to do with the positioning of the meter. So most of the meters that we have that are residential, as a consultant, I have meters thousands of dollars that I can measure with, but these are normally a single axis meter, meaning they measure one way. So in this position, they would measure the top, the ceiling or the floor, and maybe in this position, they would measure the left and right. And then in this particular position, they would actually measure front to back. So again, when you measure, you want to make sure you measure at each spot in all 3 directions. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing does what and where do we measure? So I talk about sit, stand, and sleep. Those are the most important things. So wherever you spend the most time, where you sit, where you stand, and where you sleep, you want to measure those because that's where you're getting a lot of EMFs. Recently, I was at a place, and now in the U.S., they have a lot of electric recliners. And when I measure those, they'll maybe be 400 to 450 times the safe level. It's really bad. So again, at that point...
So sorry, you're talking about the reclining seating?
Yeah, the reclining seating. And now they put motors on. So and it's just horrible. People are sitting there for a long time. So what I recommend is this remote control cutoff switch where you put the recliner in the proper position. Then you just turn it off. And then when you get up an hour later, you just turn it on and you move it back. Works well. Also beds, the electric beds now have the same issue as well. I'll measure maybe 150 times the no concern level on electric beds. But once you're there and you're sleeping, you have it adjusted exactly, then just with this particular device, you can just turn it off and you're safe through the night. So those are the 2 major issues I'm seeing. So, and what the results mean, number 4, has to do, building biology is based out of Germany and they have standards. And so we go by that standards, but industry and government, they have other standards because that would affect what they're actually selling us. So we always go by the building biology standards. And then also the 5th thing is the level of concerns. So building biology that we've accepted in the US now have no concern, slight concern, a severe concern, and extreme concerns. So with each of the meters, there's actually a category that'll tell you which it is. And then people, depending upon the risk, will then take appropriate actions based on that. But it's very, very important to use those standards and not the published standards by industry or government. And then also number 6 is how to remediate. So what do you do once you find a problem? And we talked a little bit about that. You start to unplug, you turn off, you move, you have timers, toggle switches, you have remote control. And then also you can actually have some type of shielding. And again, whenever you do shielding, I would always recommend that you had an EMF consultant help you with that because of the problems. And then even breakers. So just by moving some things a little bit, I mean, I'll be doing a job in a condominium. And what can you do? You got people above you, below you, but just by moving your bed maybe 2 feet, we dropped it by over 90%. And it's interesting because below her, there was probably someone with a fan and it was coming right through the floor on the apartment or condo below. So again, just by moving it. And what you do is after you've moved it, then you put the meter back where you originally measured and make sure that your remediation actually worked. But again, just small little things can make a huge difference.
Yes.
And then again, number 7 is you want to always test and verify. So put the meter back, see what you did, and make sure it's lower and it was, after you've done the changes.
Yeah, and that last one is super important. In fact, having a protocol or a procedure to follow is super important, because you can't just say, oh my God, there's a cell tower outside my door, therefore I'm going to, go on Amazon or whatever, buy some shielding and put that up and I'm going to be fine. That does not work, does it?
No. Again, whenever someone gets to the shielding, they need to have a meter, and it's always better if they have an EMF consultant, a certified electromagnetic radiation specialist, because of the reflective properties of almost all the shielding. And I've been in a master bedroom, and they had 9 windows, and we could see the cell tower out the side. And so what I did was, I have some fabric. So there's Swiss Shield fabric that they sell, and I put it over one window, just as a test, and it went down. I put it over the second window, it decreased a little bit. Once I put it over the third window, it actually went back up. So that window was actually being an escape route for some of the radiation that was coming in and going out, and now it was bouncing inside the room. So again, shielding is one of your final steps, and it is a good step to do, but you've got to have someone who knows what they're doing, and you've got to have meters to make sure things have not gone up the opposite way.
And it's a final step, and it's even a last resort, as I see it.
You're 100% right.
It's not natural. There's so many things we can do often without going into the shielding. And also, as you just pointed out with your explanation there, is that we can shield, if we shield without the meter, we can actually make things worse. Because if we're not actually measuring, then in the scenario you just laid out there, then we'd have got that all wrong, wouldn't we? If we'd have just sort of done it, instinctively, sort of thing. So having a meter is just so important. And so I want to ask you, your recommendations for EMF meters, because there's a lot of meters out there, an awful lot of meters out there, and the tendency is buy cheap. And I speak from experience because I'm a bit of a cheapskate, or particularly I was in terms of meters, and I made that mistake, and it costs you obviously in the long term, because what price your health. So what are your recommendations for EMF meters?
So I have some meters here. So remember, there's 4 types of EMS that we have to measure. So this is the ME3030B by Gigahertz Solutions, and they're a German company. They're very good. And there's a little.
So actually, it's the ME3830B. What you're showing us, what it says on it.
Yes.
Which is a little bit more advanced, but the 3030B.
Yeah, a little bit more. And the ME3030B is good too. And what I always try to do is give person sort of a price and a little bit better. So, this is a little bit better, but the ME3030B would work as well. So both of these are very good meters. They have an E and an F, and then when you turn it on, it actually has sound. I like that as well. So it's a very good little meter. And that does magnetic and electric. And then for Wi-Fi and wireless, there's a new meter that just came out, and Bluetooth, and I'll turn the sound off, but you can see the lights. The lights are pretty easy to see here. Sorry, let me get this going here. And the lights are nice because it shows you exactly where you are. And again, we're in a recording studio, so I think it's showing red and blinking, which probably isn't the best place to sleep at night.
Yes.
So again, this is the Safe and Sound RF detector. And then also the Acousticom 2, which is a great little meter here, and it has lights as well, so we like this one, and it has sound as well. So both of these are great little meters.
It's British too.
Yes, EMF fields. I know you like that. Although this is part of the Commonwealth, this is Canadian.
It is part of the Commonwealth, so that's okay in my book too.
Yeah, I think you talked with Rob Metziger at one time.
I did a while back, yeah.
Yeah, and so this is so it's part of the Commonwealth as well, so not too far off. Yeah. And then the final one that you can have is, I have 2 here. This is the Green Wave Dirty Electricity meter. This is a great little meter. It has some sound as well. And then also the Stetzer meter is a very, very good meter. This has been there for a long time. And with these 2 types of meters, these are the dirty electricity is the only type of electromagnetic radiation, you can actually lower with the filter. So these type of filters, here's a Greenway filter, and these are great. And then also the Stetzer filter. These are good. I do have a couple of precautionary items in my book. So if someone would ever plug these in and they don't feel well, then I would immediately unplug them, and then I would call the manufacturer, because if there are wiring errors when you plug in one of these filters, they actually can make the magnetic fields higher. So if someone happens to have all the meters, I would turn this to magnetic, and then I would lay it down, and when I would check the number, and when you plug in the filter, then if that goes up a lot, then you could have a wiring error, and at that point, it's time for an electrician. So again, some people don't have the meter, but if you do have it, I would put it on magnetic. The other thing I want to say for electric is that most people don't know, when you're measuring electric fields and you're just using the meter by yourself, you have to set it down and back up 3 to 5 feet. Because if you don't, your body will act as an antenna on this, if it's just the meter by itself. So again, whenever you're electric, then just step back 3 or 5. All the other meters you don't have to do.
Yes, but the as I recall, those gigahertz meters, be it the ME3830B or the ME3030B, they have this ground wire, earth wire, which means you don't have to do that.
That's correct. If you use the ground wire, you can use it in 2 modes. You can plug in the ground wire up here, or you can just lay it without the ground wire. You're 100% correct. Yes. If you don't have the ground wire, then you would have to step back.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And so in terms of using those meters, those there's 4 categories, and those different meters. So for instance, on the first 2 that you showed us, the Acousticom 2 and the Rob Betzinger meter, the Safe and the Safe and Sound.
Safe and Sound.
So there we're talking about the wireless, and you'll be looking at those, and those are kind of simple meters in a sense. Let's be careful what we say. So they're simple, but they're very sensitive. So they're deceptively simple. So they're really very powerful tool, because these meters have evolved a lot over the last few years. And so they are very, very sensitive, but they break all that, all this information down into just a few colored lights, which makes them very easy to use. So you don't actually have a meter reading, because it depends on where you want to go. Because for some people, it's perhaps confusing, because the readings are confusing, because we've got so many different measurement units, have we not? Volts per meter, microwatts per square meter, milliwatts per square meter.
Yeah, it's very confusing.
What is it? There's just so many. So this is a way, in using meters like this, to avoid that, not fall into that trap, and have some very simple, information which you can act on. And then with the gigahertz meter that you were showing us, so that's, as you say, electric and magnetic. You would be looking at the readings on there, and then perhaps looking at the building biology recommendations and determining your level of concern. So that's on the internet. It's all available online. It's all free. And I think it's the 2015, but the latest one.
Yes, that's the latest. And just to let you know, there's 2 major measurements with this. Magnetic fields are in milligausses and nanotesla. So the gigahertz are in nanotesla, so just make sure that you actually look at the nanotesla if you're looking at that. So magnetic fields are measured in those 2 things.
Yes. Yes.
But I do agree with you. These are great because you just have the lights, and the lights tell you where you are. You don't have to know any of the numbers exactly, but the lights get you zeroed in. And I love the lights. These 2 meters are 2 of my favorite meters.
Yes, yes. I'm the Acousticom 2 is very, very sensitive. as sensitive as the acoustimeter. So the acoustimeter is kind of the big brother where you actually get readings.
And again, if someone wanted to spend another couple of $100 US or 150, then the acoustimeter is a great meter because it gives you a peak reading at the top left of the meter, which is very, if someone would like to use that.
Yes.
So the big brother is a good meter.
And certainly at the moment, I think it's still a reference. It's been around for quite a few years. But it still remains a reference in terms of its ease of use and its sensitivity, the acoustimeter, and it's something like $400 to $500 US, I think, something like that. So it depends. It's horses for courses with these meters. It depends what you want to do, what your priorities are, but certainly those meters that you've laid out there, that really does, it's really great advice, and you've got all your bases covered with those meters. And just to finish off on just to clarify on the dirty electricity then, so there we have, certainly with the Stetson meter, a very simple number, below 50, according to Dave, who's been on the summit also, Dave Stetzer, anything above 50, you need to be, so you just plug it in on your electrical socket, look what the number is, and anything above 50, then you need to be taking action, either trying to eliminate those devices which are causing this dirty electricity, or introduce those filters, as you mentioned. And similar with the green wave, as I understand it, which is given millivolts, is it?
Yeah, it's millivolts, but it uses the same standard. So it uses a 50. If it's above 50, they want you to actually add a meter, or add a filter rather. And what I also do, and I've heard Magda Havas and some other people, in the sleeping area, I always try to actually get it below 30. So in the sleeping area, Magda Havas did a research paper where she determined the blood sugar dropped actually when it was 30 in people that she did a study once in. So, so again, for the sleeping area, I would try to get below 30, or at least that's what I do personally. Other places, I look at the 50, just like Stetzer said. So,
and again, if this is the only interview you've seen so far, don't kind of think that this dirty electricity, that's really not the important one, because there's a lot of science on this again. Science done by Professor Magda Havas and other people, a lot of science on cows. Cows don't lie. Magda Havas, one I'm thinking of is the blood analysis, where we can actually see what we call rouleau formation, where the blood is clumping, sticking together just by, doing what I'm doing now, just by being in front of a computer. And so, there's a lot of science on this, and certainly it's good to explore that to a little bit, to some extent, so you get some kind of understanding of just how important it is. And notably, cancer, lots of cancer cases, cancer clusters. One famous case is at the La Quinta School, where I think there were 24 teachers that had cancer, which are directly linked to these dirty electricity exposures. So this is no joke.
And just to tag on to that, on that school, actually, the recent numbers, 24 teachers and staff had cancer, but then former students who were in that middle school started to develop cancer in their 20s, and the latest number is 49 students have developed cancer in their 20s. And the worst number of all is 12. 6 teachers and staff have now died, and 6 students have now died. And Lloyd, when you were in your 20s, how many of your friends had cancer?
Yeah.
Like 0. And how many at a single school? And 13 times the thyroid cancer at that school, almost 10 times the melanoma, and almost 9 times the uterine cancer. And those were just the 3 top cancers. And again, Lloyd, I'm not saying that causes the cancer. I'm not a medical doctor. I can't say it. But again, there's a lot of people who've looked at that with medical degrees, and they've come up with a certain conclusion.
Yeah. So fantastic information here, Bill. Any last comments or observations you want to share with the viewers?
Well, what I'd like to say is that electromagnetic radiation is now the tobacco of the digital age. And like tobacco and smoking, it can kill you. And I want to leave the viewers with, please look at all the rest of the interviews, because as Lloyd, you've said that they're very important. You want a well-rounded information on this. And then I want to leave the viewers that we have solutions. So we just don't want to say there's nothing you can do. We have solutions, and most of the time the solutions are 1-minute solutions. And one of the biggest things I tell people is whenever you have your cell phone, to turn all the radiation off, turn airplane mode on, and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi off. That will shut the radiation off. I mean, it got so bad that we went to a house, and there was a 19-year-old. We were doing a house, and he was a firefighter, had a son, 19-year-old. So he brings him out, and he said, "Here's my son." "Oh, he's had a hip replacement." "Well, how can a 19-year-old have a hip replacement?" So he explained when he was a freshman in high school, he took his phone and he put it in his front pocket, left it in there all day long. 4 years later, he graduated, and shortly after he graduated, he was hiking, jumped off a rock, broke his hip. They rushed him to emergency. They put him on the operating table. The surgeon, the first thing she found was a huge tumor right where he carried that phone. When she went through the tumor, she couldn't believe her eyes. She actually could stick her finger right through the bone. The bone was completely dissolved. Now, I'm not saying the cell phone caused that at all, but again, if he would have turned airplane mode on and then Bluetooth and Wi-Fi off, my wife often does that when she hikes, and then every 20 minutes, she just turns the airplane mode on, checks her messages, but she's completely safe. So again, for the viewership, just think about those 3 things. Yes. Some people think airplane mode on and off will just turn off all the radiation. The phones are a lot more sophisticated. So every so often, even if you turn Bluetooth and Wi-Fi off, the phone will sometimes just kick it back on. You have an update or something like that. So always continually to look at that. And that's the safe way to carry your phone.
Yes. Excellent. Bill, where can people find out more about what you do?
Well, we're at the website is Stop Dirty Electricity. And again, we deal with all 4 types of radiation, but those are 3 words people could, easily remember. And just go out there, and we have a lot of things out there. We have some videos. I was a featured speaker at the 45th Annual Cancer Convention in Los Angeles just last year. And I talk about 10 minutes of issues, and then I talk, more importantly, of 20 minutes of solutions, just 10 solutions they can do. And we go into a little bit more about that. And we have just, like your website, just a lot of helpful things on that website. Again, there's a lot of people out there with websites. So again, I would encourage the users to look at your website, Lloyd, my website, as well as other websites. There's a lot of things out there. If you really want to know, the information's out there. And this EMF Health Summit is one of the greatest things, because now you have almost 30 people coming together, experts in their field, to give the lowdown on what is really happening.
Well, you said it all there. Thank you, Bill Cadwallader. It's you've shared some fantastic information. It's been very solution oriented, and lots of very easy to understand, and quite a few of these tips are easy to apply. So great information. Thanks so much for participating in the summit.
Thanks again for the opportunity, Lloyd. I really appreciate it.
And for all of you who've joined us today, thanks for being part of this movement. Stay tuned for the next session. My name is Lloyd Borrell. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.